Welcome to the Matchbook NFL Betting Podcast. Now, we had a slight step back on last week. What do we have, guys? 7 winners. But let's face it, we were still in the black. Pretty much everyone else didn't make money. Underdogs were the order of the day. So once we're in the black, we're happy. First of all, I want to introduce you to my all-star panel. 3 men who live for Sundays. In the top left of your screen, you are looking at Adam Chernoff. On the bottom left, you're looking at Drew Dinsick. And on the bottom right, you're looking at the Professor, Brad Allen. Gentlemen, I want one quick takeaway from week 4. Adam Chernoff, I'll start with you.
I think I was the only one that didn't help with any winners on this video, but you three did very well with that last week. Just a weird week overall. Like you mentioned, dogs came through at a really high weight, winning both outright, covering against the spread as well. Movements were a little bit all over the place again. So we kind of, after a very sort of straightforward week 3 in the NFL, we really reverted back to what the heck's going on last week in terms of market movement and results.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're the men that are going to help us figure that one out. Drew, what are you thinking? Good week, bad week, indifferent?
It was a good week for me, and it's funny because now 2 weeks in a row, picking up some winners, seeing the market move with me, and then you look at week 5, and after that, a couple of winning weeks, you tend to kind of swing away with some confidence. But this week 5 card looks extremely tight. I've fired on a couple positions. The market is entirely unimpressed with what I bet so far this week. So this is going to be a really tough week.
That's okay. By the way, 10 games in the early slot on Sunday is an absolute joke. It's
terrible.
Who's running this stuff? I don't understand how it can be this difficult.
Yeah, it just does not make any sense. Last week you had the balance of what do we have? 5 games, Prof, in the second slot?
That week 3 they had 5, and it was the best slate of the season.
Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah. What are you taking away from last week, Brad? 2 out of 3 winners for you on Insights. I think you were bang on the money with the Bucs.
Yeah, that was our first 2-unit bet of the week on Insights. So that was a nice one. I didn't expect them to put up 55 or whatever. Takeaway from the markets, perhaps, is how early you need to bet. I feel like you need to get down on Mondays now because stuff is moving to where it should be really quick. So yeah, I mean, a bit pointless saying this on a Thursday podcast, but if you can get looking at lines on Monday, I would.
Well, here's what we need to do, Brad. We just need to start recording on Monday.
Yeah, well, you won't get much insight from me on Monday.
Let's move on to this weekend's games. We'll start with Sunday Night Football as the Colts and Chiefs go at it in Kansas City. Current betting here, the Kansas City Chiefs, to nobody's surprise, 11-point favorite. You can back that at even money at Matchbook at 2.0. You can back the Colts on the money line at 5.5 or the Kansas City Chiefs at 1.2. And the total is a pretty huge one, open at 54 and currently at 56 in the time of recording. Drew Dinsick, I will leave with you, sir. You're surely not backing over 56 here.
No, this is an underlook for me, and it's a Colts look as well. I've only bet into the under here, but I have a sneaking suspicion the Colts are going to wind up on my card on Sunday also. There was a lot to be desired about the Chiefs' performance on Sunday against the Lions. They were relatively lucky to get that win. It took a pretty miraculous fumble, scoop and score that was pretty dubious actually for them to kind of stay in touch with that Lions team, and then they did just enough at the end to get the victory. They now head home. Obviously, this is a much bigger game in terms of importance and impact for them. They're playing against a conference, last year's AFC South contenders and AFC. We were thinking before Luck retirement that this team was going to compete for an AFC title. And this is going to be quite a contest for them. I would say that the Colts also underwhelmed pretty significantly in week 4. And that felt a little bit like, they were not expecting the Raiders to come in and challenge them or compete at all. That was a total surprise for them. And to a degree, they could have been looking forward to this game, to this contest, team that eliminated them in the playoffs last year. They want to get a little bit of revenge. I think the differentiating unit for me, at least in terms of feeling bullish about the Colts' chances of competing in this game and keeping the score under 57, is the offensive line for the Colts. This unit has the ability, when they're playing their best, to completely dictate the running game. And we haven't seen any interest at all from Frank Reich in this offense and letting Jacoby Brissett rip the ball down the field. The fact that he is running a very conservative offense through Brissett. They like to establish the run for whatever that's worth. And to a degree, I think they're going to have success in terms of putting a hurting on this pretty porous run defense for the Chiefs. So if they can roll out the game script that the Patriots showed in the first half of that AFC title game last year, where they can just play keep away and keep Mahomes on the sidelines, I think they have a decent shot in this one. And I think that leads to both taking the points with the Colts and looking for an under here.
Any word on Marlon Mack? We were recording obviously late Wednesday. But I think that's obviously a pretty huge one for this under. And if you're going to take the Colts plus.
Yeah, I think the offensive line is much more important in the running game than Mack personally. I think they have guys they can fill in for Mack and do a serviceable job and move the ball down the field. It's I'm more interested really as an underbacker and a Colts backer. I'd like to see Leonard out there on defense. Like, he makes a huge difference for that defense and their ability to get off the field on third down. He is like the most important part of their defense by far. They go from kind of middle of the pack unit to bottom five-ish when Leonard is out of there. So that's the injury that I'm most interested in following here. But I do expect that Leonard will be out.
Adam Chernoff, I don't have the exact figures at hand, but these primetime games seem to be trending very much under at the moment. Is there any major reason for that? Are you thinking, are you on the same lines with Drew?
I would definitely be looking to the under here as well. And just to follow up on some of those injuries, interesting to see Marlon Mack. He was pulled out of the game last week, but there was announced on Monday that it wasn't injury related. So I'm not sure if there's something else going on behind that, but he was never medically ruled out of the game. So it was really a team choice to keep them out. I don't know how much of that was potentially given the score in that game at the time that he was hurt. Looking forward to this game against Kansas City, where, as Drew mentioned, running the football is going to be a huge advantage for the Colts. I don't know if the Chiefs have really been exposed for their rush defense. We've sort of got used to them just having a very bad rush defense as bettors overall. But this year, despite some of the acquisitions in the offseason, 58% of opponent runs this season have graded successful. That's the second worst rank in the NFL. And then you look at just the overall grades of this run defense, it's the worst in the NFL. So they've been bad in years past, but this year very concerning. And it's not like they've faced too difficult of running backs in the opening 4 weeks of the season. So now they get probably the best offensive line they've faced. And if Marlon Mack was not medically ruled out of the game, there's nothing saying he shouldn't be playing in this game as well. So they're probably going to face the best running back as well that they've seen this season. T.Y. Hilton did not play last week. He's usually extremely tough as they come in the NFL. So to see him not play last week was certainly interesting. It could have also been something looking ahead to this week. So his status, along with Malik Hooker in the secondary for the Colts, that's going to be big as well. So something to keep an eye on throughout the week as we're recording early in the week, so we don't have 100% confirmation on any of those guys. But they're going to go a long way to this game. But really it just becomes the Colts. If they're able to control the game on the ground, this is going to shorten the game up quite a bit. That total biggest one we've seen all season so far is going to become pretty out of reach if the Colts continue to have success moving the ball short through the air and then on the ground as well, which is where they're going to look. So I would have to lean to the under as sort of my side handicap. Points just a little bit to the Colts. Not going to be on the Colts because of injuries, but I think the under the book here overall.
Brad Allen, in agreement with the guys on the under?
Yeah, I have backed the under. That is a bet I have placed. I totally agree about, obviously, the Colts. The only way they're going to play this is to try and just run the hell out of the ball. They're 28th in the NFL in how much they run the ball compared to what you would expect, or how much they pass the ball. So one of the top 5 run heaviest teams. And then the other interesting angle here I thought was, so say the Colts don't get what they want here. They don't get to run the ball. That's one game state. The other one is that the Chiefs come out and splat them. But even then, we've seen they take their foot off the gas in the second half. And I thought it was interesting. So since 2013, the Chiefs on the road have allowed 23.5 points a game. At home, it's 17 points a game. It really helps the pass rush. And then last 6 seasons, Chiefs games on the road, 51.6 points. Chief games at home, 42.3. So that's a 9-point difference essentially at home. I think that kind of Arrowhead crowd really helps the pass rush. And then once they've got 20-point lead. They just shut it down in the second half, set the dogs loose. It's kind of I think to Adam's point about the rush success rate, they don't care. If they're up by 14, you can rush the ball 6 yards a pop all day. They're happy with that because they're just going after the quarterback. So I think really whichever way this game plays out, I think it's going to be a lower scoring second half. So yeah, especially at this huge number, I think the under's quite a nice look.
Yeah, it's a crazy number to begin with. I mean, you open a number here at 54, and the fact that it gets bet up to 56, you would think that they'd be coming in even on the under 54. But what do I know? Brad, I'll stay with you for the next game. Let's take a look at one of those two Sunday evening games for us, Brad. The Green Bay Packers at the Dallas Cowboys, both unbeaten coming into last week, but both now 3-1. Currently getting back to Packers 2.65 on the money line. The Dallas Cowboys 1.59. The Cowboys are 3.5-point favorite, and that's at odds against 2.06, and the total is 47. Now, Brad, you were talking a while ago about betting early in the week. This is one of the games that I had bet early. I bet under 48. Try and talk me out of it.
Well, I wouldn't talk you out of under 48, Sully, because it's 46 now, I believe, right?
47.
47.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I
mean, I think the story here is the injuries, isn't it? So Devontae Adams on the Packers side, probably unlikely to play from what I can gather. Tyron Smith, the left tackle, unlikely to play. Michael Gallup, possibly unlikely to play. So, I mean, that's a lot of offensive building blocks taken out of the game here. I think Dallas is hurt more. I mean, I'm sure most people remember the Adrian Claiborne game last year where the Cowboys went to Atlanta without Smith, and the right end got 6 sacks. So I've got the numbers here from last season without Smith. So the sack percentage goes from 8% to 12%, or 12.7% when he's not in there. Yards per rush goes, or successful run rate goes down by 9% as well. So it's basically a significant drop off. And what also concerned me was the Cowboys play calling on Sunday night. So I mean, earlier in the season we were raving about all the motion, all the play action, the heavy passing splits that the Cowboys were running, and then they come out Sunday night, biggest game of the season, and they run the ball more often than they pass the ball, or they ran the ball the most they've run it all season at 1.8 yards a clip. They didn't run play action. They ran the least amount of play action all season. And then they had the worst game of the season. So I don't know what they were doing there. So essentially, there's uncertainty here. But given that uncertainty, which can only work against the Cowboys, and given the fact that Smith is out, I think the Packers would be the lead here.
Okay, are we taking them plus 3.5, I presume, Brad, or are we just keen to play them on the money line?
Probably the 3.5, as you say. I think it probably will be lower scoring given the injuries to the weapons.
True, Dinsick, as Brad was discussing the Dallas offense, I saw this exasperated shaking your head. You were obviously on the Dallas Cowboys as well on Sunday night.
Well, I had the under Sunday night, thankfully. Although I felt like the Cowboys were the right side heading into the game, and they completely. I got some Cowboys second half that was lucky to cash, but Kellen Moore's offense and his approach on Sunday Night Football was not good. And this is in light of having done a nice job at weeks 1 and 2, especially.
Yep.
My underlook in part last week was based on noticing that Cooper's a little banged up. He can be taken out of the game with your best, players if you have good covered corners, and they don't have a second option. There's no one else on this Cowboys team that can create separation. And Dak Prescott is a little risk averse. He's not throwing balls into tight windows. He is legitimately only throwing to the open guys. And so as long as Gallup is out, the Cowboys are a complete stay away from me. And now that we've introduced this wrinkle of who really is behind the offense, because that was a classic kind of Jason Garrett-esque performance out of the offense against the Saints on Sunday. It was horrible. And, you would expect coming into this game with Tyron Smith out, that's a huge blow. Gallup probably out. That's, again, that's another, hugely important piece. You would expect that the Cowboys think like, oh, look what the Eagles just did, running the ball down the Green Bay's throats. That's what we're going to do, And so I can see all the makings here, all the setup here for an under where the Cowboys just try to play keep away. But I got to tell you, man, Aaron Rodgers was very, 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 very solid in that Thursday night game. The Packers get extra rest here in preparation for this one. Granted, they will be without Devontae Adams, but I got to tell you, some of the other chemistry looks like it's budding a little bit with Geronimo Allison, with Valdez Scantling. So I think there's plenty of opportunity here for Aaron Rodgers to throw his way back into the game if they get beat on the ground with the Cowboys rushing attack. But I'm going to probably stay away from this one, but Brad's look on the Packers plus 3.5 makes a ton of sense to me.
And before I get to you, Adam, Brad, you wanted to come back into something Drew said there.
Well, yeah, just a quick one on the Dallas defense here. So they're ranked 15th by DVOA, so kind of middle of the pack. But they've actually faced the second easiest slate of opponents in the entire league. If you actually go through it, so Dolphins, terrible. Teddy Bridgewater, terrible, won't throw the ball downfield. The Redskins, terrible. Eli Manning, terrible. So if you've got Aaron Rodgers willing to push the ball down the field, and they kind of set him loose last Thursday, I think he could do some damage.
Yeah, and even without Devontae Adams, those young Packers receivers looked quite decent. Adam Chernoff, what are you thinking on this one?
Well, how happy were you watching that game to sort of be a little bit vindicated with your preseason Kellen Moore comments? I was
finally,
I know.
Took a few weeks.
That was on Jason Garrett. That was on Garrett. I thought Kellen Moore still has the goods if they let him.
You know what I can't, just before I come back to you, Adam, I can't figure out what Garrett was. Like, I remember when he first came into the Dallas Cowboys offense coordinator with Tony Romo, he was the hot, young kind of stud, like, offense coordinator. Like, Baltimore pretty much had the job offer there for him, and he just seems to, since he's become a head coach, just become totally drab.
Well, I think that the pressure maybe got to him a little bit to an extent in the biggest game of the season. Cowboys really rolling, and they might have just relied on what they were looking from the first 3 weeks of the season. But sort of like the guys already touched on, early down passes went from an average of 63% in the first 3 games down to 50% in this game on Sunday night. And that was with an offense that was struggling to stay on the field. You look at the time of possession, Saints held the ball for nearly 40 minutes. I was watching that game with the Cowboys ticket in my hand, waiting for them to do something. It just seemed like they never had any chances. They barely, if you take away that last drive of the game, they only ran 47 plays in the entire game up to that. And then they ran 5 on that last drive that was like 1 minute and 10 seconds long. But the Saints absolutely choked them out. And despite the Cowboys scoring the only touchdown of the game, they ended up losing that one overall. So there's some more to take away from that on the Saints side. But what was really concerning to me, if we look at both of these coaching performances, I think what Pettine and the Packers did on defense against the Eagles was more concerning than anything the Cowboys did. I'm all for playing a dime defense, but when you're playing it against the rush on 3rd and 1 and 3rd and 2 situations, Pettine was electing to play with 6 defensive backs against this Eagles offensive line and running attack, which was dominating them for the entire game. He didn't adjust at all, and you don't want to have defensive backs matching up with offensive linemen in power situations. And for some reason, the Packers thought that that was the way to go. You look at the Packers defense overall and sort of this game, it's really a who's who handicap because you have both of these teams played 3 somewhat misleading games to open the season and had very positive results. And then they both get embarrassed a bit on primetime television. So now coming into this game, you're looking at the Packers. We know that their secondary is very good and they can play this dime defense, play with extra defensive backs for speed and coverage. 39% of passes have graded successful against them, which is a phenomenal mark for this defense considering where it's come from. But is this a true reflection of the defense or not? And a question I posed earlier in the week is, let's say that Thursday night football against the Eagles was the Packers with Aaron Rodgers becoming a top 10 passing offense, and this defense goes back to be sort of top 15. And the question I posed was, are the Packers better with the top 10 offense and a middle of the pack defense, or a top 10 defense and a middle of the pack offense? So if we see this sort of readjusting for the Packers, that's interesting. But I think Brad nailed it on the head with the Cowboys. They played Eli, Keenum, Rosen, and Bridgewater as the 4 quarterbacks so far. They've allowed 49% of passes to grade successful against them, which is 26th in the NFL. So down against these quarterbacks, not doing well. Big step up in competition, obviously, against Aaron Rodgers. But really, it's just a game I think is probably priced pretty accurate side and total. It's a stay away from me, but an interesting one to watch with potential situations setting up for both teams next week, which I think are pretty favorable.
I might just add something there as well, because Drew, you touched on it last week with the Eagles with having that much game time. You know, Doug Peterson had a plan. You can't really see, you know, Jason Garrett and Kellen Moore coming up with a similar plan here. Because that Eagles offense, to their credit, they ticked a lot of boxes.
That's absolutely true. And on top of this, like, Green Bay's coaching, LaFleur looks like he's out of his depth. I mean, he's had a whole extra week of prep time too, Thursday night to Sunday night. He's, you know, that he's got the advantage here. He should have something good, but, you know, he has not shown the ability to really find the right, you know, rhythm in the passing game for a full 60 minutes. Like, it's like he's got a nice script to come out. He's got a nice set of play calls, you know, and then there'll be a couple bursts throughout the game where he kind of lets Aaron Rodgers make some of the decisions, and they look like an absolute all-universe offense. But we haven't seen it for 60 minutes. And, you know, maybe I agree that Green Bay is the right side here. I agree they're a live dog here for the reasons we pointed out, injuries specifically affecting the Cowboys and coaching holding the Cowboys back. But I can't make a play on Green Bay because of that, you know, their limitations in the coaching rail right now. LaFleur does not look like he's got it figured out yet. He may by the end of the season, but it's not there yet. And, you know, we talked about it a little bit, one of two games in the afternoon slate. Like, the NFL really, but, you know, they put the Cowboys on prime time last week, and they put the Packers in prime time last week. They get people all watered up for Cowboys Packers, and then they put them in the only game in the afternoon. They are going for like a ratings, you know, crush. Like, but then lo and behold, two coaching staffs that don't really know what they're doing out there, and, you know, and a bunch of injuries that are going to limit their kind of effectiveness. This is all the settings for, like, they're trying to get everybody to tune in, and then it's just
it's a kind of a name fixture, though. It's that old NFC rivalry, the Packers and the Cowboys. Right. Before we move on, Adam Chernoff, you wanted to come back in there.
Yeah, just to sort of wrap things up with that LaFleur talk, Drew's absolutely right. But what's really interesting is not necessarily his ability to put together a full game plan. If we look at sort of the scripted offense, the first 15 plays of a game, the Packers have generated more expected points within those 15 plays than any other team in the NFL. It's after that where they drop off to one of the worst teams in the NFL in that same regard. So we're looking at a team that comes out with extremely great play calls that they're executing at a very high rate. And then after that, it completely tails off. So his ability to not adjust to the opponent is very shocking. I think we saw that on Thursday night.
Maybe back in the first quarter handicap, maybe. That's probably the way to go. Just don't know. Always looking for an angle. Let's move on to one of the 10 early games that we have on the slate on Sunday night. We're going to be bitching about this a lot, guys. I can just see it the rest of the year. I just can't get over this. But we'll put that to one side. The Minnesota Vikings head into New Jersey to take on the New York Football Giants. The Giants 5.5-point underdog here. You can back that at 2.03 at matchbook at odds against. You can back them on the money line 3.1. The Minnesota Vikings, with the Titan that is Kirk Cousins at 1.44, the best luck of you if you want to back that. 44 is the total, slightly favoring the under. Adam Chernoff, like Vikings last week against Chicago. Obviously, that was a great defense, but can they kick it on this week against the poor Giants, Steve?
Yeah, I think Minnesota rolls in this one, and I'll be happy to oppose Daniel Jones for the second week in a row. Last week, not quite the result I was hoping for, but in retrospect, if we're going to know that the star wide receiver and quarterback switch is going to happen a couple days after the bet's made, then maybe look at that one a bit differently. But nevertheless, not a good result. But a lot of what the Giants did was sort of disguised in that game because of that. They ended up getting a sort of a positive upgrade in a couple of different spots, which I don't necessarily agree with. But let's just focus on Daniel Jones for a second. Last week, the handicap was all about the secondary, and it's not like that went away. And they also lost Ryan Connolly, their main inside linebacker, so potentially 3 linebackers out. We'll get to that in a second. But just looking at Daniel Jones overall, the knock on him coming into the draft was not necessarily how high he was drafted, but the reason that nobody wanted to draft him that high was because he was dependent on an RPO for much of his time in college, and he had really poor decision-making skills. He would consistently force the ball into very tight coverage windows. And that has still existed in the NFL through his first 2 starts. He's thrown into more windows with a defender within 1 yard of the intended receiver at the second highest rate. So he's still forcing those balls into coverage windows. But you look at who he faced. You get the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who known for the soft coverage they play in the secondary, and the Washington Redskins, another bottom 8 defense. Now he goes against the Minnesota Vikings, who under Mike Zimmer are known for how they disguise coverage, their ability to play press man coverage. They're doing so about 1 every 3 plays this season, and their ability to disguise their blitzes. And we saw sort of an unsustainable performance against the Bucs, where Daniel Jones was averaging just over 10.1 yards per attempt under pressure. We saw that come back down to earth against the Washington Redskins, 3.7 yards per attempt when faced with pressure. So that's more like what you're used to seeing with a rookie quarterback. That number might go even lower. But we also saw the effect of no Saquon Barkley in the game in the second week. He had him for the first half against the Bucs. Now that run option is not there for him. He only threw 3 passes past 10 yards downfield. 2 of them were intercepted. 1 of them was an incompletion. So that gets awfully interesting, seeing how his air yards overall reduced from 10.1 to 5.2 in the first game where Barkley wasn't there to support him out of the backfield. So obviously going to be a very difficult game for him matching up against the Vikings. That's why we see this number so high. But from the other side, again, this Giants secondary, one of the worst in the NFL, if not the worst. They get a bit of an upgrade because of the Redskins, but you get Dwayne Haskins, you get Case Keenums for a couple of series. That obviously didn't work out without Terry McLaurin in there providing any threat, but a couple of downfield passes were still missed, and that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. Now he gets Kirk Cousins, who's sort of being dragged through the mud this week. But you look, the exact same thing happened to Aaron Rodgers, Joe Flacco, and Case Keenum after they played the Bears as well. So you can't really judge a lot off of that defense playing against the Bears. Obviously not a good performance within the division.
Yeah, and in fairness, Adam, that's the one time that they've really had to throw the ball this season.
For sure. And now you look at this game, Giants potentially without 3 linebackers. They don't generate a lot of downfield pressure, which is how you bust up the outside zone scheme that the Vikings run. If Dalvin Cook's more involved, I think we see a game that looks a lot more like what they had against the Raiders, or even in the opening week against the Falcons, where they're able to play behind that run. We saw Diggs and Thielen come out after the game and sort of start challenging the offensive coaching staff. I'm hoping that results in more emphasis getting the ball to them, maybe a bit more balance than we've seen overall. But this is a game where I think the Vikings have a lot of success offensively. And then it's just time for them to tee off on Daniel Jones in the pocket against Mike Zimmer and this defense. It's a complete mismatch for the Giants offense. I think this one gets pretty ugly. I took 4.5. I still think even at 5.5, there's certainly value on the Vikings.
Brad Allen, any issues with laying 5.5 with Minnesota? I mean, look, you look at this Vikings D. For me, it's the best unit on the field, far and away. Brad may be on mute, or maybe possibly is on mute.
Yeah, sorry. I'm usually tapping away, so I mute myself and then forget because I'm a pleb. I basically agree with Adam. He's nailed it. I don't think Daniel Jones is going to have any luck here. There's one top 10 unit on the field here. It is the Vikings defense. I mean, the other look, I was quite surprised it was set the over-under at 44.5. I do agree we'll see a game a bit like that Falcons game where, you know, the Vikings just squeeze the life out of them like an anaconda, and, you know, they're happy to run Dalvin Cook 25 times in the second half, and I don't see Daniel Jones having any success.
Yeah, that total has opened at 46 and has tumbled to 44 at the time of recording. Drew Dinsick, I presume you're not going to go with Danny Dimes here.
No, this is a Vikings play for sure. I like Adam's points a lot. The injuries to the linebackers for the Giants they're kind of not really covering that very widely. It's more about, hey, look, Saquon Barkley's back at practice. Well, this is the perfect recipe for get right spot for a Vikings offense that, you know, was a couple of plays away from being competitive in that Bears game. And, you know, I think that we know of all of the teams across the NFL, I think we have one of the better handles on the Vikings and who they are and what they're capable of right now than a lot of the other teams. There's uncertainty all over the place. The Vikings are a team that is going to beat the tar out of a bad team, period. And they're going up against a young quarterback, and they run a complex defense. And granted, Shermer is familiar with what the Viking defense does. So there's some potential that he may have some looks. He may be able to keep him in it, keep it punching, you know, early here. He may be able to keep it competitive. But I think over the course of the game, the mismatch between, the Vikings, what they have weapons-wise on offense and what the Giants have defensive is humongous. And they're going to force mistakes out of a young quarterback over the course of 60 minutes. So this is a nice look to back the Vikings. And It's if there was anything on the Giants defensively that I thought they could take advantage of the Vikings' weaknesses, I would be a little bit more hesitant laying these points. And I don't really worry too much about the travel spot for the Vikings, even though this is their third game on the road in 4 weeks. It still is a great matchup for them, defense and offensive, and this is where they should shine.
All right, a massive vote of confidence from the guys on the Minnesota Vikings. Let's move on to another game on Sunday night, the early slate of those 10 games. Brad Allen, your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You're a big fan. You called them early last week. Opened at 5.5. That pretty much got hammered. It was 4.5 on Monday. On Tuesday it was 3.5, and it's still 3.5. The Bucs getting the 3.5, 1.91 at match. Booking back to them on the money line, 2.63. 46 is the total. Brad Allen, you staying on the Bucs this week?
Yeah, I mean, if you've listened to me talk about the NFL at all this season, you know where I go here. I would take the money line at 2.63. I think Jameis has shown us that he's a volatile quarterback. Hopefully he stays hot. I'm not super excited about backing Jameis while he's playing well, because he's just as likely to throw 3 interceptions this week. But the Bucs are fine. They're, by DVOA this season, they're a top 10 unit. I think they're one of the only teams top 10 in DVOA who've also faced the top 10 toughest schedule. So they've been pretty impressive that they can score points here. The bigger thing for me is just how bad Bridgewater is. I think the Saints have stolen 2 wins here. So Bridgewater is averaging 6.5 yards per pass, 27th in the NFL. His QBR is 24.2, 29th in the NFL. His average pass travels just over 5 yards, shortest average pass in the NFL. 27% of his passes have resulted in first downs, 30th in the NFL. When he's tried to go deep, he's 1 for 7 when he's thrown a pass of 16 or more yards. So he can't throw downfield. Now I think that works. The Bucs are happy swarming to the ball. This Tampa cover 2, they will let you throw it over the middle and they will swarm you. And I just think if the Bucs do score, which again I think they will get 20 plus, and Bridgewater is forced to open it up, I just don't see him keeping up. And I don't really see. I mean, this line says the Saints are the better team, and I just don't really see how that's correct with a much worse quarterback.
Yeah, and this Bucs run D is for real. First in the league. It's only giving up under 60 yards a game. Drew, what are you thinking on this one?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to hang too much on the run defense for the Bucs here, but I like all of the points about the Saints and their inability to really get anything going offensively. It's pretty clear that they are putting together wins on the back of some pretty suspect offense. And given what the state of the league in 2019, and given the Bucs' ability to, absolutely put pressure on you from a point scoring standpoint, I think they are the right side here. I'm going to stay away from this one because there are, even in playing 55 points on the Rams, there are still things and decisions being made by Byron Leftwich for the offensive coordinator in the Bucs that I scratch my head about. And and when you're going up against a relatively well-coached team and Sean Payton and the Saints, they can manifest, and those mistakes can come back and bite you in the ass. So this was one that I was pretty clearly interested in staying clear of. But if there was a side that is has value, it's absolutely the Bucs in this spot.
Adam Chernoff.
Well, clearly I missed a note because I was mentally prepared for the Falcons and Texans and why that's the worst game.
I changed it in the WhatsApp group yesterday. I called an audible. Sorry, you might have seen that one. Sorry.
I see that now, but I'm happy to talk about why I'll be in agreement with Brad here on this one. You look at the Saints, they're outgained by 1.8 yards per play on the road at Seattle. They're outgained by 250 yards. They managed to score a couple touchdowns on defense, special teams, and on a short field. They come out with the win in that game. We look back to Sunday Night Football. They're outgained by 0.6 yards per play. They hold the ball for 37 minutes. They don't score a touchdown, and we managed to win that game as well. So now we're coming into the third week under Teddy Bridgewater. Significant step up in rush defense. I'll give the Bucs a ton of credit for what they've put together. They've faced the 4th most difficult schedule of opposing rush offenses, and they have the number 1 success rate in the NFL against it. This front 7, very much for real. They also get Devin White back this week in all likelihood, so that's a big boost for the front 7. There's just not a lot for me to get excited about this New Orleans Saints team. But I think that's why we've seen such a significant movement down. And Brad's able to get a very nice price early in the market there. But this one's been sort of hammered with Tampa Bay money. But I don't think overall you're going to see a ton of volume on Tampa Bay in terms of number of bettors looking to it. So it's a nice little perception spot as well that's setting up here to back the Bucks. But kind of like Drew alluded to, I'm certainly not looking to the Saints here, but there's something about the Bucks that doesn't quite sit right with me. I'm bullish on the team overall. I like the outlook and where they're going to go in the future. But there's just, I can't put my finger on it. And I've been sort of talking on shows this entire week about there's something not quite right about it. You look at this, they put up 55 points on 380 yards from Jameis Winston.
They got a lot of short fields, obviously, with Jared Goff turning the ball off.
It was
the ball
like,
off what felt like 10 times.
And you can't discredit them for the execution, but it just seems like a spot where they could go into New Orleans and we get a classic Bucs game where they put up a ton of yards, but just don't quite finish on the end. It's been a little bit of a different story this year, but I can't quite put my finger on it. That's probably the worst thing to say on a gambling show, but that's just what's keeping me off the Bucs overall. Just the experience that I have just has me a little bit uncertain. But certainly the Bucks are nothing in this handicap, and I think Brad's on a very good number.
Okay, this seems like one that if you're going to back them, you might as well just take them on the money line, not to worry about the points. Let's move on to the Ravens and Steelers. Once upon a time, this was pretty much one of the games of every week if it was on any week. 1.59, you can back the Ravens on the money line. The Pittsburgh Steelers 2.58, Steelers getting 3.5, 1.87, 44.5 is the total. Drew Dinsick, I'll start with you on this one. I presume from Monday night that that win over the Bengals that you wouldn't exactly be buying in on the Steelers on the back of that.
No. Mason Rudolph put up one of the more fraudulent high completion percentage. We scored 27 points and we won. That was an absolute joke of an effort from a tackling standpoint on the Bengals. They had linebackers out there who they'd be embarrassed to play for Namibia in the Rugby World Cup.
There you go.
Bengals getting paid to be out there for the national, trying to tackle in the National Football League. It was an embarrassing performance by the Bengals defense. And I think, when it's working, when you can dink and dunk and gain yards that way, great, stick with it, but we haven't seen anything from Rudolph that he can absolutely push this offense, that he can move them if he's down and out, if they're behind in a game, if they need to throw to pass themselves back in. They have one weapon in Juju Smith-Schuster on this team who's dynamic. Everything else is pretty pedestrian, most notably the quarterback. So going up against the team in the Ravens, who I still, even in defeat last week, there were still signs there. They were sloppy. They looked like they had left a lot on the field in the Kansas City game the week prior. We kind of expected that. We talked about that in backing the Browns last week. But this is a different game. They have to get back on track. They have a dynamic offense. The Steelers defense can be attacked. They can be scored on. I am on the Ravens here at -3.5 on the road. Home field advantage obviously is not what it used to be. And I'm not afraid to lay points on the road these days. But I got to tell you, the market is against me a little bit on this one. Every time I put a little bit of pressure on this Ravens number, somebody's more than willing to come right back in with Steelers. So somebody's seeing something here. And if this ends up being a 3-point game in favor of the Ravens, I'll be pretty disappointed. But that looks like what the market is trying to tell.
Yeah, you call it. Look, just looking at yesterday's prices, Steelers plus 3.5, 1.93, and it's now down to 1.87. But I'll be honest, I can't disagree with you on that. I think the Ravens probably have a bit of a bounce back in them as well. Brad Allen, what are your thoughts on this one?
So I have backed Ravens -3.5 and under 44.5. Right, that's still the numbers.
Yeah, so that's an interesting total as well, Brad. Is that open at 42.5? It's been bet up to 44.5, so you're getting that extra 2 points.
I'm surprised it's been bet up. I'm guessing that's the Ravens' last couple of results have been quite high scoring. But so just on Mason Rudolph, again, they're treating him like he's a moron. So his first 21 completions Monday night had 32 total air yards. Like,
incredible.
So, they're just running this wildcat stuff, and we know that's not sustainable. We know that will get shut down, I would suspect, this week. The Ravens' biggest weakness is probably the injuries to their corners. This was kind of the strength coming into the season, but they've been very injured back there, and they've been giving up deep balls all day long. Well, it doesn't look like the Steelers are going to let Mason Rudolph attack that. And then on the other side, we've seen, I would say, a fairly significant regression in Lamar Jackson from the opening game of the season. And I mean, if you think about it, that the Dolphins, obviously in that first game, they spent all off season preparing for 60% runs, and then they come out and throw these deep bombs. So maybe you discount that a little bit. And then his QBR since then is probably around 60 a game, rather like, say in the first game it was 99, and it's hovered around 60 since. So I don't think he's kind of the explosive downfield passer that perhaps we thought he is. So essentially we're going to have this old school AFC North slugging match, in my opinion, where both teams are going to sort of run the ball, short passes over the middle, 3 and out, punt it away, and go again. So yeah, I would favour the under as well as the Ravens.
What is your kind of strength on those, Brad? More the under, or kind of 50-50 split, or what do you think?
I would prefer the under.
Okay.
Partly given that market movement. I'm surprised that's still there. So I wonder why.
Yeah, exactly. And look, if you're backing an over, even a number of 44.5, you pretty much have to hope that both offenses are clicking some bit. And you can't really see that with Pittsburgh at the moment, the way they're kind of playing it that way. Adam Chernoff, anything to add on this one?
It's an interesting. So this game will go over if Mike Tomlin can put together a competent game plan, which is probably the biggest if in all of professional football. But if he realizes the way to attack this Baltimore Ravens defense is to spread the offense out as wide as possible. We saw Kyler Murray do it. We saw the Cleveland Browns do it.
Yeah, which you called last week, to be fair. You did call that one.
You can right now at the moment with this Baltimore Ravens defense, you can blindly back your way into a game plan that will produce success given the injuries that they have. I don't think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are necessarily capable of doing that, which is the only reason that I'm not going to be touching this game. But you look at what they faced above average in terms of easy schedule. They faced the 7th easiest schedule of passing opponents and the 12th easiest schedule of rushing opponents. And they've had below average success rates in both of those categories. Kyler Murray's first road start, as well as Cliff Kingsbury's first road start, they were able to move the football pretty efficiently. Saw the Cleveland Browns all of a sudden get right against them last week. Now you get the Pittsburgh Steelers, as Drew and Brad mentioned. You're not going to expect much from Mason Rudolph in terms of pushing the ball downfield. It's hard for me to imagine on a single week turnaround that Pittsburgh is able to put together something in practice that results in anything different. If they do, then Pittsburgh's going to have no problem moving the ball, and I think we're going to see a ton of points. If Pittsburgh's weak anywhere, it is in their secondary defending the pass, despite the acquisition Fitzpatrick in the last 2 weeks. They're still struggling. I don't think that the Bengals are going to give anyone any reason to believe otherwise on Monday night in the game where they hold them to 3 points. So that probably dampers this perception just a little bit. But if Baltimore comes back to what we saw on the first 2 weeks of the season, where they're pushing the ball downfield through the air, they're certainly going to have success here against this Pittsburgh Steelers secondary that ranks 30th in terms of success rate allowed passing through the first 4 weeks against a pretty difficult schedule all around as well. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm not going to touch it just because I'm not necessarily buying into the fact that we're going to see that drastically different game plan from the Steelers. But if they happen to back into it, much like the Browns did, then we're probably going to see some points on the board here. But it's a no bet for me.
All right, let's move on to the final game that we will look at in depth. London is calling for the Raiders and the Bears. Tottenham Hotspur hosted a 7-2 win for Bayern Munich on Tuesday night. I kind of get the feeling, gents, that this is kind of a game that we might just see 7 points or 9 points. It's a total. I'm looking at the total at the moment that is 40. And Brad Allen, I might start with you this one first, because we previewed this Jags-Titans game a couple of weeks ago. And this kind of strikes me as something very similar, where we kind of will try to talk ourselves into backing over because it's a key number, or even just looking at that. I mean, look, at 21-20 gets us up there, but I can't see where Oakland get the points against this Bears defense. And at the other side, you've Chase Daniel throwing the ball for the Bears, and where are they going to get the points? Brad's on mute again.
Sorry, embarrassing. I think I could make, I've not bet the game, but if I had to make one bet, side or total, it would be the over 40. I think Chase Daniels I'm not saying he's an improvement over Trubisky, but he does play on time and on schedule. He does run the offense. He does kind of, make the read and throw the ball where it's supposed to be thrown. He's obviously not he's not the dynamic athletic threat that Trubisky is, but, he's got a good offensive coordinator. He's got a good schema. If they can come out, and I think they will score their points. So this Raiders defense is probably the worst in the league. It's ranked 32nd by Pro Football Focus. They've just lost Vontaze Burfict. They've also got injuries at other linebacker spots. I think the Bears will score here. I think the Bears will get to 24. And then on the Raiders side, I think they're a little bit underrated. Possibly they are set up to play well against this Chicago Bears pass rush, because the Raiders do get the ball out so quickly that if anyone's going to move the ball against the Bears, I think it would be the Raiders. And then you have a look at Oakland's success rate. They're top 10 by passing success rate. So, yeah, as I say, I've not bet the game, but I would say over is the best bet if forced.
Okay, forced, obviously. There's going to be a few of our viewers or listeners going to this game in London. But just on that one, would you not take the Bears team total, Brad, though, if you're kind of looking at a total and you're more confident that they'll get stuff done against the Raiders defense?
What is the Raiders team total? Because...
Well, if it's 40 and they're 5.5 point favourites,
it's going to be pretty low. I'll be confident enough. I've been going on that this Bears defense is probably overrated, and as I say, I do think they can take advantage a little bit. One issue is so the Raiders went over early this year, and the Bears are going on Thursday, as I understand it. So the Raiders last year went late, and obviously they laid an absolute egg. I think they scored 3 points or 0 points possibly. So they've kind of changed it up. So you would think they might be the better prepared team here, which is why, again, I'd rather take the over than just the Bears team total over.
All right. You put me back in my box about that under as well, but I just struggle to see where those points are. Drew Dinsick, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, that definitely challenged my expectations going into this game as well. A week ago, I would have said, hey, you're going to give me 6 points for this Bears team after how poor Oakland looked last year in London. I'm going to be all over that. But Brad nailed the travel angle has been neutralized here because the Raiders went straight from Indianapolis. So they should have the body clock adjustments in reasonably well taken care of. Their preparation should be pretty sharp. On the other hand, the Bears are injecting a brand new quarterback. Obviously he's been a backup and he's been there for many years, but they are now new system for Chase Daniels in place of Mitch Trubisky in the same week that they're preparing to travel to London. That spells trouble. I think if I had to make a play here, I'm probably looking for the Raiders to cover the points, maybe even get the win, all on the back of the fact that they should be more well adjusted to the travel in the time zone. And the preparation for them should be a little bit more focused and concentrated than what the Bears have going this week.
Adam Chernoff, we discussed off air about this synthetic pitch that is being used at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. We also discussed that there's a hell of a lot of weather coming in, the storm of Lorenzo on the British Isles over the weekend. I'm kind of a bit low to look at like 72-hour forecast, but there's a hell of a lot of rain forecast for the London area on Saturday night, Sunday. But I digress a small, but I just love talking about weather. Adam Chernoff, have you any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, you stole my line. That's exactly it. You look at, they're going to be, they're moving out a natural grass surface to expose a synthetic turf surface. I don't know when that changeover happens. I also don't know necessarily how this field is expected to drain. We've seen London games in the past where the field surfaces have been less than ideal, obviously in different stadiums. But this is a case where It's a bit unprecedented in what they're doing. It's not uncommon for playing surfaces to get ugly, and you consider this matchup of these two teams going against each other. If Oakland's going to move the ball, as Brad said, they're going to be doing so very quickly, getting the ball out of Derek Carr. We saw in week 1 against the Denver Broncos that who have an equally strong pass rush, sort of playing a similar aggressive style defense. They were trying to move the football, and they were having a lot of success getting the ball out of his hand very quickly. So if there's one way that you can negate a pass rush, it's by getting the ball out of their hand quickly, and that's what they do exactly with Derek Carr. But my issue sort of with potentially looking at the over in this one would, I guess the field conditions are a bit of an unknown, but when you're getting the ball out that quickly and you're playing behind this offensive line, doesn't necessarily mean that you're pushing the ball down the field. Your receivers don't have a ton of room to generate when you're getting the ball out of your hand in less than 2 seconds per snap. So a lot of these passes for the Raiders, despite being successful, they're really sort of becoming extensions of the run game in many ways. And the Bears overall really choke out the run game of any team, and we haven't seen the Raiders sustain any success on the ground since week 1 against the Broncos. So if they don't have any sort of balance within this offense, then the Bears corners can play awfully tight outside and really limit these gains to just a couple yards at a time, which do their job at taking away this clock. Derek Carr, very high completion percentage. He's able to get the ball on target. But if you're getting the ball on target and pick you up 2 to 3 yards a gain, it's not necessarily too different from what you see running the football with any success. So the Bears, obviously, backup quarterback, that brings with it challenges, travel aspect for both games. Not a game I'm going to touch, but a lot of interesting things to watch from both sides of the football, and then also with the surface.
Brad Allen, you wanted to come back in there, mate. Obviously, we brought up the pitch, we brought up the weather. There's no way you can let this one go.
No, it was actually more of a scheduling note, Sully. I just wanted to have another go at the NFL for scheduling this one at 6 o'clock. Well, yeah. The best thing about the London game is you get extra football at 2 o'clock. And I don't understand who's running the show, mate.
I couldn't understand that. I just presumed, actually, Brad, I didn't actually kind of look at the times, and I knew this game was on, and I presumed that, was it the Lions played in that, what was it, like the 1/2 kickoff last year? Absolutely epic Sunday. You have the game at 1/2. We're talking about our time though, guys. But I know from people even living on the East Coast of the States, they're getting up, having their breakfast and watching the game. And, breakfast football. And, you know, if guys in the West Coast like Drew, they're getting up at like 5:30 to watch football. Drew, it's magical stuff to be able to get up at 5:30 in the morning and watch an NFL game.
It is the best.
It is.
The best. Guys, I'm feeling like maybe this Roger Goodell character doesn't know what he's doing. It's tough.
Possibly.
It's tough to put my finger on it. Maybe he doesn't know what he's doing.
There's just something not quite right there. Not quite right. Right, guys, we covered 6 games there. Obviously, we can't get through every one of them with time constraints. But, Drew, I'll stay with you for a second. Anything else there that the listeners or viewers should be looking out for this weekend?
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with my Patriots defense bringing home unders. This Redskins situation is a disaster. This has all the makings of Patriots try to get right. I almost laid the points here, honestly. Like this has the makings of a Patriots beatdown, but I think it still stays well under 44 points with the Patriots defense being the dictating unit. I also have a play on the Monday Night Football over. I think sets up pretty well for 2 pretty solid offensive performances with the Browns and the Niners. Should be a fun game. I like over 46.5 points there quite a lot. And then I'll save my best bet, but ironically it's on the game that Adam says is the least bettable game on the card. It's my favorite look across the whole slate. So I can't wait to hear.
Game of opinions, lads.
Atlanta and Houston is just a game. Like, did you just know there's going to be some carnage somewhere on this? We'll get to that in a second, though. Brad, anything else for you?
I've also backed that San Francisco Cleveland over. The 2 defenses look quite good on paper, but have had 2 of the easiest schedules. And I'm always banging the drum that defensive stats are a function of who they faced rather than the defense themselves. So I'm a big fan of that look. I've backed Denver plus 6.5, which is quite an ugly one, but some of their offensive success rate stats are very nice. And we know the Chargers don't really have a home field, so I think that's a nice look.
I'm sure if you agreed with at least one of Brad's there.
Yeah, I'll pile in on that over. And I think there might be a lot of reasons why in an Insights column that you'll be able to read this morning on Matchbook Insights.
Right.
But to end any other business just quickly, if we're going to be sort of doing some math here, looking at a couple teams, if the Patriots are 15-point, the spread in that game is 15 points. So we're looking at the Patriots being 18 points better on a neutral field than the Redskins. Next week, the look-ahead lines in Las Vegas came out. The Redskins are 6.5-point favorites on the Dolphins. So if we're going to put that game on a neutral field, we're looking at the Redskins 9.5 points better than the Dolphins, which means the difference now between top and bottom of the NFL, approximately 28 points on a neutral field in a space where you look back the last 10 years, you're not seeing much more of a gap than 13 to 14 points. That's just after 5 weeks when week one, that difference was only 12.5 based on the win totals and the week one point spread. So we're seeing an awfully big stretch in terms of the market overall in the NFL.
Drew, just very quickly on that Patriots one, because I know yourself and Andy were discussing the deep dive. What kind of number did you get? That opened pretty stupid at like 46 or something, didn't it?
Yeah, it opened at 47.
47, wow, okay.
I only got a little bit at 44.5 and 43.5 before the limits came up. I got more. My biggest position's at 43.5. I'm going to add more, probably Redskins team total under here. Jay Gruden legitimately trying to get fired at this point. Like all this rumor mongering last week before the game, like, oh, they're not giving Haskins the practice reps, they're not starting Haskins. Gruden didn't want Haskins, and so what does Gruden do? He waits until like 1-2 series into the game and then throws Haskins in there, calls some aggressive play calling that he knows the guy doesn't have a feel for.
Yeah.
Embarrasses the kid, and says management, see, he's not ready. Like, this is
just being an asshole. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, and he's not going to be a bad player. I've seen him in college. He's quite decent. He probably should have been drafted further up the board as well. Right, gents, we're almost out of time. Let's go stay in the quad box and let's get your best bet of the weekend. Adam Chernoff, what have you got?
I need a winner for the video. It's been grim. Let's go Vikings minus. Let's call it -5, -5.5, depending what number you can get.
Okay, Drew Dinsick, what are you thinking?
I'm going to take in the Texans, laying the points with the Texans. This is a nice get-back spot for them. The Falcons season is over. Dan Quinn's tenure in Atlanta is done. And I think they picked their number here. This is the Tennessee could have scored 40 on them last week if they had stayed aggressive, if they had pushed the issue. They scored 24 and then just kind of ran out the clock. I don't think you see the same effort from the Texans here. I think the Texans put an old-fashioned butt kicking on this team, and so I laid 5.5 with Houston.
Brad Allen.
The Seattle Seahawks -1.5. I could talk for about 10 minutes about this one. It's one of my favourite bets of the season. So maybe we'll get into it tomorrow, Sully.
Yeah, we'll wait for tomorrow. We'll wait for tomorrow for that. But we have had good success with these Thursday night best bets. Yeah. Drew, you're kind of getting stuck into them early. I love that. Right, my best bet for the week. This may raise a few eyebrows. Over 47 in the Cardinals and the Bengals, and I'll explain why. Both those defenses are absolutely rubbish. I think this is a kind of a get-better game for Andy Dalton and also Kyler Murray. That Arizona offense has got to start kicking it out and got to get him running, and I think he runs well against this Bengals defense. So give me over 47.
Garbage game, garbage points.
There you go.
Garbage points.
There you go. It's somebody's garbage. It can be my garbage on Sunday. Do not care. But give me that winner. Right, guys, out of time. Thank you for listening, or thank you for watching today. Hopefully, we've put you in good stead to find some Week 5 winners. Obviously, you can see Brad Allen on the screen. He's probably mad to get out of the screen. He's on my screen. You can't see him. But anyway, that's it from us. We're done. We will talk to you next week. Best of luck with your bets.